awful lot to talk about. We'll start with the upcoming autumn statement. Not a budget, an autumn statement, although it does seem, with 3 days of debate around it in the Commons planned by the Commons afterwards, have a budgety kind of feel about it. I do find it extraordinary. We've had the last week, and particularly in the last couple of days, numerous, the Chancellor, you've got other Treasury ministers going on TV and radio and very coyly saying, oh, well, I'm on telly and radio for an interview about the autumn statement, but I can't possibly tell you anything about it. I mean, show us a bit of ankle. Why don't you show a bit of ankle? But as usual, we see stories put out about things that might happen and then, oh, no, we're not looking at that. We couldn't confirm that. From what we're hearing about, whether it's income tax, national insurance, business taxes, inheritance tax, what do you think, A, that the government will do, and B, what should they do?
Well, look, the first thing to say is all of these decisions are dictated at the moment by this thing called fiscal headroom.
Yeah, what is that?
Basically the gap between what the government is spending currently, according to the budget, and how much it could, according to its own fiscal rules, so that it doesn't get into a mad rush on the pound like we saw with Liz Truss. And last time round, in the spring, there was only 6 billion quid to play with, not a lot of money. This time, figures are up in the air a little bit, but it's becoming clearer and clearer and clearer. Estimates right at the top, JP Morgan said £26.5 billion are looking right. So if the Chancellor's got 26.5 billion quid, and a lot of these tax cuts cost 2, 3, 4 a pop, all of a sudden we can see lots and lots and lots.
OK, it's all very well, except it's all complete nonsense and lies, because there isn't any fiscal headroom at all. The Chancellor doesn't have an extra 10, 20, 30, whatever, billion extra pounds. What he's got is more taxes coming in because of inflation, and people having to have mostly not inflation-proof pay rises. They're feeling poorer. He's taking more tax from them because of the fiscal drag, and everyone's being dragged into higher and higher thresholds of paying higher rates of tax. Even those sort of tax rates that were aimed originally at the very rich are now being paid by, average, Joes on average income, struggling to pay their bills. He's getting that extra money in. But most of that money, by the way, goes straight out in interest payments, do they not? On the huge deficit and debt that we're paying for. So, all he's going to do is going to carry on borrowing more money if he does the tax cuts. We're going to have less spending on things which people perhaps do want spending on. Yeah. This is all smoke and mirrors nonsense. We don't have any money.
Well, Tory politicians always want to pay down the deficit, except when there's an election coming up. And
dun, dun, dun.
Well, I don't know if you've seen the polls, Julia, but they're not great. So now the chequebook is open, and it might be on borrowed cash, but cash is coming nevertheless. It's funny you mentioned thresholds. So this is the 40p threshold.
This is the complicated stuff which most people, let's be honest, most of us won't be able to take in. And so you can hide it a lot, but people will nevertheless be seeing more money out their pay packet going out, and they're going to feel poorer. So
back in time 20, 30 years ago, if you were a very high earner, then the 40p tax rate were coming for you. If you were you were top 10%. If you were a director, it was never meant to catch big chunks of society. But
teachers.
What has happened?
No, teachers,
is it's come
staff nurses
down ever so further and further. So now it's just over £40,000. So it is catching police sergeants, it's catching ward sisters, it's catching, if you're, let alone not head teacher or even deputy head teacher, but if you are a head of department, head of a subject at a secondary school, you are now paying higher rate tax. And there are a lot of Tory MPs that are very unhappy about that one in particular. They want work there. There's also stuff, if you've got 3 kids, the way that child benefit gets tapered off you, between £50,000 and £60,000, you're paying a marginal tax rate of every extra pound that you earn. How much gets taxed away? 72 pence on the pound.
Ouch.
No wonder there's a lot of people deciding...
We don't tax billionaires at that rate. But this is the key thing, isn't it? Is that even if there were like a 1 or 2 pence cut in, say, the standard rate of income tax or in national insurance, they just put a load of those things up, because when you have that fiscal drag, you are basically putting people's taxes up, more people. And even if you're already paying that tax rate, more of your income is being taxed at that rate than it was previously. So it won't really be a tax cut. So this is the thing I don't understand. The idea that people think, oh, well, Tory MPs, it appears mostly, we want tax cuts. And tax cuts are what's going to win the election and turn around a 25, 28-point lead for Labour, because people are going to say, oh, my tax rate's gone down by, 1 pence or 2 pence in a pound, when their overall tax payment they're making to the Treasury has gone up by huge amounts more than that. People are not stupid. They can look at their statement from the pay statement, what goes in the bank, and they can look at what their outgoings are. They know they're spending more at the supermarket. In the last 2 years, our food shop bill has gone up by 30%. That is a huge sum of money. Our energy bills, even this year, going down from last year's comedy, I mean, almost laughable amounts, they are still going to be sky high, best part of double what they were a few years ago. Cost of running your car, rents have gone up, people's mortgages have gone up, unless they're fixed rate, in which case they will very soon. Every single aspect of our lives has gone up massively, and even though inflation is now at 4.6%, but that doesn't mean that the inflation rate we've seen for the last year or so has suddenly disappeared. We're going to be living with that forever. That's there forever now. People are not going to be fooled by this stuff.
Ronald Reagan used to ask, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? The answer in this country is an emphatic no. We have never had higher taxes. We've never had more debt. Living standards have never fallen in the way that they have. Thank you very much, lockdowns.
Happy Monday, everybody.
That's the situation. And into this, the Chancellor comes. But look, I tell you where you can sort of see behind what's going on. Where does he choose to be generous? We have, on the one hand, tax cuts for working people. Those are things around threshold. Those are things around VAT, the VAT threshold that hits white van men in particular, things like that. And then on the other hand, inheritance tax.
Just wanted to come on to that. There's been a lot of talk, and it's kind of been sort of poo-pooed by sources in government. Inheritance tax, yes, everything you buy has already been taxed already if it's your income. But inheritance tax does feel, I think, particularly unfair to sort of the middle-class families who are the only ones who are hit by it. The rich don't pay it. Everything's in trust funds. They don't pay it. The vast majority, 95% of families will never pay this tax. But it is now being taxed on people at sort of lower and lower sort of amounts of money. And a lot of those people feel, well, I worked very hard, I've saved my money, I've put a load of money into my property, it's gone up in value, and they feel it's unfair. They want to hand money on to their families. I'm always in two minds on this. I think, it does feel like it does entrench inequality, and yet it's people's own money. And we don't tax people at 40% when they spend their money. So why are we taxing them at 40% when they save their money?
Look, I think inheritance tax is immoral. I think it is genuinely wrong to say to a parent that they cannot hand on to their children that they've worked for without taking off a great big slice to the tax man at threat of imprisonment for their kids if they refuse to pay it. I think that's wrong. But, and it's a big but, politics is about choices. And on the one hand, you have a tax that affects 4% of estates. And on the other hand, you have the highest tax burden ever, full stop, ever affecting working people in this country.
Priorities.
And there are red wall MPs right now that are feeling like they are being held up as a sacrificial lamb to save Rishi in the South, to save those Tory safe seats in the South. And if inheritance tax deserves another name, Labour used to get mad when the Tories called it the death tax. Really, it's not the death tax anymore, it's the Surrey tax. If you live in Surrey, if you live in Hampshire, if you live in Middlesex, you're paying that tax.
Otherwise, you're not. Yeah, I mean, that is the key thing. The key thing is, though, as Labour was saying, if they did cut this, this is basically a budget for the rich, effectively, and that's what it would look like. Just finally, we'll move on to other topics, but I want to talk about business taxes. A lot of calls for like VAT rates, so the point at which you're VAT registered, going up to 250 grand, not 85 grand, what it is, because we've got loads of businesses that as soon as they get to around the 80 grand income, they go, let's not bother. Once we have to charge an extra 20%, basically we're going to lose business, and then so the threshold is important, whether or not you cut the VAT rate that businesses pay in hospitality. People like Sacha Lord pushing out today, look, this is an existential, this is survival mode now for hospitality, given what they've gone through in recent years. And also that corporation tax rise. And you get a lot of people saying, you can write off, you're against tax, your investments. Companies don't have any money. They've spent all their money during lockdown. They've got nothing in the bank to do that investing with. If we want to see growth, cutting inheritance tax, a load of rich people who just leave it in the bank, that's not going to make a difference. But helping businesses who provide 80% of employment in this country might be a good idea. Yeah, and look, the trouble with business tax is it's not sexy, right? Yeah. It's not sexy. It doesn't look great. I mean, one of the easiest taxes that they can cut that will boost growth enormously is to let foreign tourists that buy luxury goods I'm so into
get their VAT back. Now, look,
what we should really do to help people in this country is help rich foreigners. Come on.
But Julia, I hate it, but I have to tell you...
They're going to other countries spending their money.
They're going to other countries. Milan, Paris are going through the roof. You can see, are growing. The UK's luxury sector is flatlining. That's costing jobs.
And those people spend money in hotels, in restaurants and bars and theatre.
Jobs for working people. Now, I hate it. And this is the trouble with business taxes. It's never sexy. You can never win votes from cutting it. But it's what you need to deliver long-term growth. And unfortunately, politicians, in my view, are all too happy to say, no, I'm not going to do the unsexy stuff that's actually good for growth. Do the headline tax to 1p to income tax, which, as you say, won't stop the fact they're paying higher taxes than ever.
Exactly.
And try and pull the wool over our eyes.